Poor Waitress rents a boyfriend for $900 and discovers the love of her life. Amber Johnson felt the weight of her mother's words like a stone on her chest. After years of caring for Mrs. Barbara alone, watching her battle an illness that seemed to drain all hope from their family, she never imagined the deepest pain would come from a conversation she overheard by chance. It was when she heard her mother talking to a neighbor about stopping her medication. The reason shattered Amber's heart. Mrs. Barbara believed her daughter would never be happy because of her, that at 32, still single, Amber was dedicating every minute of her day to 2 jobs just to cover the medical treatments. "I'd rather go soon than watch my girl stay alone forever because of me," Mrs. Barbara whispered to Mrs. Dorothy, unaware Amber was listening behind the door. Desperation gripped Amber in that moment. She had to do something, anything, to keep her mother from giving up on life. That's when a desperate, risky idea came to her: convince her mother she'd met someone special. "Mom, I have a surprise for you," Amber said the next day, forcing a cheerfulness she didn't feel. "I met a wonderful man at the restaurant. He wants to meet you for your birthday next week." Mrs. Barbara's eyes lit up in a way Amber hadn't seen in months. "Really, my dear? Tell me everything." Amber spun a story about a polite, charming customer who always requested her table, but inside, she knew she only had 7 days to turn that lie into reality. With a heavy heart, she remembered an ad she'd seen online for social event escorts. Her last savings, exactly $900 set aside for emergencies, would now fund the most important charade of her life. On the day of the supposed boyfriend's arrival, Amber waited nervously at a small cafe near downtown Denver. Her hands trembled when a tall man in a gray suit and hat approached her table. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he carried a yellow flower in his hand. "Amber Johnson?" he asked with a kind smile. "Yes, that's me. You must be Ethan Parker," he introduced himself, handing her the flower. "Pleasure to meet you in person." There was something different about this man. His posture was elegant, his words carefully chosen, but Amber noticed a melancholy look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. As they discussed the details of their act, she was struck by how genuinely interested he seemed in understanding her mother's situation. "Your mother means everything to you," Ethan said after Amber explained the illness and treatments. "She's all I have in this world," Amber replied, surprised by how easily she opened up to a stranger. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us so much as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. On the eve of Mrs. Barbara's birthday, Amber tidied up their small apartment in Aurora. Simple flowers decorated the table, and she'd baked her mother's favorite cornmeal cake with the little money left after paying Ethan. When Ethan arrived, Amber was stunned by his transformation. He wore an impeccable dress shirt and carried a bouquet far more expensive than she could ever afford. He greeted Mrs. Barbara with a respectful bow that brought tears of joy to the older woman's eyes. "What a gentleman," Mrs. Barbara whispered to Amber. "You've chosen so well, my dear." During dinner, Ethan played his role with such perfection that even Amber began to believe the charade. He talked about literature, mentioned small details about Amber's routine that showed attention and care. But it was when he brought up the rag doll Amber had kept since childhood that something felt off. "I'm sure little Amber loved playing with that blue dress doll she showed me," Ethan said casually. Amber froze. She had never mentioned the doll to him, let alone that the dress was blue. How did he know that detail? Mrs. Barbara noticed her daughter's surprised expression and decided to test the young man. "So how did you two meet again?" she asked curiously. Ethan and Amber exchanged a quick glance. They had rehearsed an answer, but the comment about the doll had left Amber confused. "It was at the restaurant where Amber works," Ethan said. "I always asked for her table because I noticed how kindly she treated everyone." "How long have you been dating?" Mrs. Barbara pressed. 3 months, they answered in unison, but Ethan added, "Actually, we met 4 months ago, but we started dating 3 months back." Amber looked at him, startled. They had agreed on 3 months for everything. Why was he changing the story? "It took me a while to work up the courage to ask Amber out," Ethan explained, looking straight at her. "She always seemed too special for someone like me." There was a sincerity in his words that made Amber's heart race in a way she couldn't explain. The next day, Amber was working at Mountain Spice downtown when Ethan showed up unannounced. She nearly dropped the tray of juices she was carrying. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, pulling him aside. "I thought it'd be good to make our story more convincing," he said. "If your mom calls asking about me, people here need to know who I am." Amber wasn't sure whether to be annoyed or impressed by his dedication to the job. But she soon noticed Ethan's presence was causing a stir in the restaurant. Vanessa, the 45-year-old manager, had always treated Amber harshly, criticizing her work and making snide remarks about her personal life. Yet, when she saw Ethan, well-dressed and polite, treating Amber with affection, her attitude changed completely. "Amber, sweetheart," Vanessa said with a forced smile, "I had no idea you had such a distinguished boyfriend." Ethan ordered the most expensive dish on the menu and left a generous tip. When a difficult customer started complaining to Amber about the wait time, Ethan stood up and approached. "Excuse me," he said firmly but politely. "You're being very unfair to the waitress. She's doing her absolute best." The customer immediately fell silent, taken aback by Ethan's demeanor. Amber was speechless. No one had ever stood up for her like that. Later, as Ethan prepared to leave, Amber followed him to the door. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "You didn't need to spend your own money here." "What do you mean, my own money?" Ethan asked, seeming genuinely confused. "The tip, the expensive food, that's not part of the deal." Ethan looked away for a moment. "I just wanted you to be treated well at your job." There was something in his voice that made Amber realize this wasn't just professionalism. That evening, Mrs. Barbara called Amber, excited. "Honey, I've scheduled a family lunch for Sunday. I invited your sister Elizabeth and her husband. I want them to meet Ethan." Amber's stomach twisted. Elizabeth had always been the successful sister, married to a lawyer, living in a big house in Cherry Creek. She never missed an opportunity to criticize Amber's choices and make comments about her love life. "Mom, I'm not sure this is a good idea." "I won't take no for an answer, Amber. It's time for the whole family to meet this wonderful young man." On Sunday, Mrs. Barbara's house was filled with tension. Elizabeth arrived with her husband Richard, both eyeing the modest apartment where Amber lived with her mother with suspicion. "So you're Amber's famous boyfriend," Elizabeth said when Ethan arrived, looking him up and down. "What do you do for a living?" "I'm a consultant," Ethan replied calmly. "I work in customer service for a few companies." Technically, it wasn't a lie, Amber thought. He really did handle clients. During lunch, Elizabeth asked pointed questions, trying to catch them in contradictions. But Ethan answered with such ease that even Amber was impressed. "And where do you two plan to live once you're married?" Elizabeth asked provocatively. I hope Amber doesn't expect her fiancé to shoulder everything alone. Amber's face burned with shame, but Ethan leaned forward, looking straight at Elizabeth. "Your sister is the hardest-working, most dedicated woman I've ever met," he said with a passion that sounded completely genuine. "She holds 2 jobs, takes care of her mother with unconditional love, and still finds the energy to brighten the day of anyone she meets. Any man would be lucky just to be in her presence, let alone have the privilege of building a life with her." Silence fell over the table. Mrs. Barbara had tears in her eyes, and even Richard seemed moved. Elizabeth was left speechless for the first time in her life. Amber looked at Ethan with a mix of gratitude and confusion. The way he had spoken about her, the emotion in his voice, it didn't feel like acting. After Elizabeth and Richard left, Mrs. Barbara hugged Ethan tightly. "Thank you for standing up for my daughter," she said. "Elizabeth sometimes forgets that words can hurt." "I only told the truth," Ethan replied, and Amber realized he truly believed every word he'd said. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the days that followed, Ethan began showing up at unexpected moments. When Amber left her second job exhausted at a diner in Highlands Ranch, he was there waiting with coffee and a tired smile. "What are you doing here?" she asked every time. "Making sure our story is convincing," was always his reply. but his actions showed genuine care. He carried her heavy bags, waited for the bus with her even when it started raining, and always asked if she'd eaten anything. Jenny, a co-worker at the diner, pulled Amber aside during their break. "Amber, you're falling for this guy," she said bluntly. "Don't be ridiculous, Jenny. It's just a business arrangement." "Business arrangement, my foot. I see how you light up when he shows up. Your eyes sparkle in a way I've never seen before." Amber denied it vehemently, but deep down she knew Jenny was right. Every encounter with Ethan made her heart race. Every caring gesture made her wonder if it was still just an act. One afternoon, Mrs. Barbara needed to go to Mercy Hospital for routine tests. Amber was nervous, but Ethan showed up in the waiting room with a bouquet of white flowers. "You didn't have to come," Amber said. "Of course I did. I'm worried about her too." They spent the whole afternoon at the hospital. Ethan chatted with Mrs. Barbara about her favorite books, the recipes she loved to cook, and stories from her youth. Amber noticed he truly listened, asked thoughtful questions, and laughed sincerely at her mother's jokes. Dr. Thompson, Mrs. Barbara's physician, pulled Amber aside. "Your mother has improved so much since she met your boyfriend," he said. "Her emotional state has drastically changed. It's remarkable how emotional support affects recovery." Then he added quietly, "Men who are paid to keep company usually don't show this much dedication. He genuinely cares about you both." Amber's heart raced. Had the doctor noticed something? Later, when Mrs. Barbara pretended to fall asleep in the waiting room, Amber and Ethan were left alone in the hospital hallway. "Can I ask you something?" Amber whispered. "Of course." "How did you know about my doll?" "I never told you about her." Ethan stayed silent for a long moment, staring at his hands. He began, but was interrupted when Mrs. Barbara woke up. "How nice that you two are talking," she said with a knowing smile. Young couples need their little moments. Amber realized her mother hadn't slept at all. She had faked it to leave them alone on purpose. That night, Amber couldn't sleep. The doctor's words echoed in her mind, along with the vulnerable moment she had shared with Ethan at the hospital. She was falling for a man who was being paid to pretend he liked her. The reality of the situation hit her like a punch to the gut. In 2 weeks, the month she had paid for would end, and Ethan would disappear from her life forever. The next day, Amber made an impulsive decision. After work, she discreetly followed Ethan when he left the restaurant. She needed to understand who he was beyond the professional facade. Ethan walked several blocks until he reached a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Denver. Amber hid behind a lamppost as she watched him enter a small, well-kept house. Through an open window, she saw Ethan talking to a teenager in a wheelchair. The boy had the same dark eyes as Ethan and a wide smile that lit up his face. "How was your day, Tommy?" Ethan asked, hugging his brother. "It was good, bro. The physical therapist said I'm improving, but you look tired." "I'm fine, don't worry. What matters is that you keep getting better." Amber watched Ethan prepare dinner for his brother, help him with his physical therapy exercises, and then sit down to review what looked like medical bills. Guilt crashed over her like a tidal wave. While she wasted her savings on frivolities, inventing a fake relationship, Ethan worked as a companion to pay for his disabled brother's special treatments. She had judged his job without knowing the story behind it. Amber returned home with a heavy heart. The next morning she called Ethan. "I want to end our agreement," she said bluntly. "Did something happen? Did your mother suspect?" "No, it's not that. I found out about your brother." The silence on the other end was deafening. "How did you—" "I followed you yesterday." "Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had such noble reasons for doing this job." "Amber, what I do with my personal life is none of your business." "You're right. That's why I want to end our arrangement. I can't keep pretending this is okay. There are still 2 weeks left in the month. I'll honor our contract until the end." "No, Ethan, enough. I'll figure out how to explain it to my mother." But Ethan was adamant. He showed up at the apartment that afternoon with flowers for Mrs. Barbara and kept up the act as if nothing had changed. During a walk in City Park, an elegant middle-aged woman approached the group. "Ethan, what a surprise to find you here," said the woman, greeting him with excessive familiarity. Ethan tensed up immediately. "Hi, Mrs. Wilson, how are you?" Well, dear, you didn't return my call about Saturday's event. I need you to accompany me to my niece's wedding. Amber felt her blood run cold. Mrs. Barbara was standing right there, listening to the whole conversation. Mrs. Wilson, this is a friend of mine, said Ethan, trying to smooth things over. A friend? Patricia looked at Amber with disdain. I thought you only worked with people from our social circle. The embarrassment was unbearable. Mrs. Barbara glanced from Ethan to Amber, and Amber saw the exact moment the truth dawned in her mother's eyes. Mom, Amber began. Let's go home, said Mrs. Barbara in a voice Amber didn't recognize. The walk back was completely silent. Ethan tried to say goodbye, but Mrs. Barbara didn't even look at him. As soon as they stepped inside, the explosion happened. How could you do this to me, Amber? Shouted Mrs. Barbara, tears streaming down her face. Mom, let me explain. Explain what? That you thought I was stupid enough to believe that charade? You were giving up on your meds. You said you'd rather die than see me alone. Mrs. Barbara stopped mid-shout, surprised. You heard that conversation? I did, Mom, and I panicked. I didn't know what else to do to make you want to keep living. Silence filled the apartment. Mrs. Barbara sank heavily onto the couch. Amber, I always knew that boy wasn't really your boyfriend. What do you mean? Sweetheart, I'm 67 years old. I've lived a long life. I can tell when someone's pretending and when they're being genuine. Amber was stunned. Then why did you pretend to believe it? Because it had been so long since I'd seen you truly smile, so long since you talked about a man with that spark in your eyes. Tears began rolling down Amber's face. But he was being paid, Mom. None of it was real. Maybe not for him at first, Mrs. Barbara said softly. But it was for you. And I saw how he looked at you when he thought no one was watching. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. Mrs. Barbara was heartbroken, not by the lie itself, but by the pain she saw in her daughter's eyes. In the days that followed, she blamed herself for pushing Amber into that desperate situation. If I hadn't said those things about giving up on my meds, you'd never have gotten into this mess, she repeated. Amber tried to comfort her, but inside, she was devastated. Ethan had completely vanished after the scene in the park. He didn't answer calls, didn't show up at the restaurant anymore. He'd disappeared from their lives as if he'd never existed. Mrs. Barbara's health began to decline again. She barely ate, slept poorly, and Amber could see guilt eating away at her. A week after the incident, Amber gathered her courage and went to the house where she'd seen Ethan with his brother. She needed to return the money for the days he hadn't worked, nearly $400 she had no right to keep. When she arrived, she found only Tom, Ethan's brother. The boy was alone and looked worried. You're Amber, right? He asked when she introduced herself. How do you know my name? Eth talks about you all the time. Well, he's been acting weird since he came back from that job. Where is he? At the hospital. He's got a terrible fever, but he still left early this morning to work. Said he had commitments he couldn't cancel. Amber's heart clenched. Ethan was sick, but still honoring his professional commitments. Tom, can you tell me which hospital he's in? The boy hesitated for a moment. Promise you won't be mad at him? He's already feeling bad enough. I promise. At Mercy Hospital, Amber found Ethan admitted with pneumonia. He was asleep, looking even younger and more vulnerable with his pale face and tousled hair. The nurse explained he'd been admitted after fainting during an event where he was accompanying a client. He was working even though he was sick? Amber asked, indignant. It seems so. When he got here, he had a fever over 102 degrees. Amber sat in the chair beside the bed and watched Ethan sleep. All the anger she'd felt had turned into genuine concern. In the hours that followed, she made sure to care for him just as he'd cared for her and her mother. She brought homemade food when he woke up, kept him company, and helped Tommy when the boy came to visit his brother. Amber? Ethan startled awake on the second day. What are you doing here? I came to return the money for the days you didn't work, she said, placing an envelope on the nightstand. You don't have to. Yes, I do. And I also came to take care of you. Why? Our contract is over. Amber looked him straight in the eyes. The contract is over, Ethan. Now I'm here because I want to be. Something shifted in his expression then. The professional barrier he'd always kept up finally began to crumble. Amber, I need to explain some things. You don't owe me any explanations. Yes, I do. When you came to me for this job, I almost refused. Why? Ethan looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Because I already knew you. Amber was confused. What do you mean? I used to eat at Mountain Spice sometimes, when I had money for a decent lunch, and I always asked for your section. Amber's heart began to race. You recognized me from the very first day. I did, and I took the job because I wanted an excuse to talk to you. Ethan, I kept the napkins where you wrote those sweet little notes for customers, had a drawer full of them at home. Amber felt tears welling in her eyes. Why didn't you ever try to talk to me before? Because I knew I had nothing to offer. A waitress who worked as hard as you deserves someone better than a guy who works as an escort to pay the bills. You think I care about that? You should. You deserve someone who can give you stability, a better life. Ethan Parker, you're the most foolish man I've ever met, Amber said, wiping her tears. Do you think I fell in love with the money you don't have? With the job you do? You fell in love? Completely, hopelessly, and against all logic. Tommy chose that moment to walk into the room with a mischievous grin. Finally, the boy said, Eth, if you don't kiss this woman right now, I'll tell her about all those papers you scribbled her name on. Tommy, Ethan turned red. And Amber, did you know the $900 you paid him were donated to your mom's treatment? He asked the hospital not to say anything. Amber looked from Tommy to Ethan, stunned. You did what? Tommy, you've got a big mouth, Ethan muttered. The money was mine. I could do what I wanted with it, he said defensively. Ethan, why would you do that? Because when you told me about your mom, about how you worked 2 jobs to pay for her treatment, I knew that money would mean more to you than to me. Amber could no longer hold back her tears. Without a word, she leaned in and kissed Ethan softly. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too, he replied. I've loved you since the first day I saw you writing "Have a blessed day" on a napkin for a grumpy customer. Tommy pretended to feel sick. I think I'm going to throw up from all this sweetness, he said, but he was smiling. When Ethan was discharged from Mercy Hospital, Mrs. Barbara insisted on making a proper dinner to get to know Tommy. This time, without performances or lies, the two families genuinely connected. Tommy, do you play checkers? Asked Mrs. Barbara. I do, Mrs. Barbara, but I'm really good. We'll see about that, kid, she said with a mischievous smile. While Tommy and Mrs. Barbara played checkers and discussed strategies, Amber and Ethan talked in the small kitchen. And now? Asked Amber. Now we build something real, Ethan answered. No contracts, no lies. But will you keep working as an escort? Ethan sighed. I need the money for Tommy's treatment. I can't stop now. Just then, someone knocked on the door. It was Vanessa, the restaurant manager, holding an envelope. Amber, I came to bring your overdue payment, she said, but stopped when she saw Ethan. Oh, your boyfriend's here. Former manager, Amber corrected. I quit, remember? Actually, I came to offer something for both of you, Vanessa said, looking between them. I'm opening a new restaurant downtown. I need someone to manage customer service and admin work. Ethan showed incredible skill handling difficult people. Amber and Ethan exchanged surprised glances. The salary would be enough for both of you to live comfortably, Vanessa continued. And Amber, you'd be the service supervisor. It's better than being a waitress. Vanessa, I don't have admin experience, Ethan said, but you have customer service experience. That's what matters, and I saw how you handled those tough customers. I need that in my place. Amber looked at Ethan, waiting for his answer. Can I think about it and give you an answer tomorrow? Ethan asked. After Vanessa left, Ethan explained his concerns. If I take this job, it'll take much longer to get the amount of money I need for Tommy. What if we share all the responsibilities? Amber suggested. I can help with his treatment too. We can do this together. Amber, you already have your mum to take care of. And you have Tommy. We're family now, Ethan. Families help each other. The next day, they accepted Vanessa's offer. 2 months later, they were working together at the new restaurant, which quickly became a success thanks to their exceptional service. Tommy was improving with physical therapy, and Mrs. Barbara had gone back to taking her medication religiously. She and Tommy had developed a special friendship, with her teaching him traditional recipes and him teaching her computer games. "Amber," Ethan called one afternoon as they organized the restaurant's cash register. "Do you remember when we really met? At the cafe near downtown?" "No," he said, pulling a yellowed napkin from his pocket. "It was 2 years ago, when you wrote this." Amber took the napkin and read, "I hope your day is better than your morning. Sometimes bad things happen to make room for the good ones." Amber: "You kept this?" "I kept all of them. That's when I knew I wanted to get to know you better. Why didn't you ever try to talk to me before? Because I thought a woman like you would never look at a guy like me." Amber smiled and kissed Ethan softly. "Sometimes the best things in life start in ways we never expect." 6 months later, in the same restaurant where it all began with lies and contracts, Ethan knelt in the middle of the dining room during work hours. "Amber Johnson," he said, pulling a simple ring from his pocket. "Will you marry me? For real this time, no contracts or payments." "I will," she answered, tears in her eyes. "But I have one condition." "What?" "That we share everything. Joys, sorrows, responsibilities, dreams, everything." "Deal," said Ethan, slipping the ring onto her finger. The restaurant's customers applauded. Tommy cheered from the table where he was doing homework, and Mrs. Barbara cried with happiness. A year later, Amber and Ethan were married and owned their own restaurant. Spice and Love had become the hotspot of downtown Denver, known not just for the food, but for its warm service. Tommy worked as a cashier, having recovered enough to stand for a few hours each day. Mrs. Barbara handled the decor and always greeted customers with stories from her youth and advice about love. "Who would have thought the love of my life started with an online ad for a companion?" Amber said one afternoon, watching Ethan teach Tommy how to handle the register. "True love is priceless," replied Mrs. Barbara, arranging flowers in a vase. "But sometimes it costs exactly $900 to begin." Amber laughed and hugged her mother. "Mom, thank you for pretending to believe that lie." "Thank you for lying, my dear. It was the most beautiful lie of my life." Ethan walked over with Tommy beside him. "What are you two thinking about?" "We're thinking that sometimes the greatest truths come from the most well-intentioned lies," said Amber. "And that a family can form in the most unexpected ways," added Tommy. "And that true love always finds a way," finished Mrs. Barbara. Ethan pulled Amber into a hug and kissed the top of her head. "You know I still have all those napkins. All of them. Every single one. They're stored in a box in our dresser. Why? So we never forget that love started long before the $900. It started when you chose to be kind to a stranger one ordinary afternoon." Amber looked around the restaurant. Happy customers chatted at every table. Tommy told jokes to an elderly woman dining alone, and Mrs. Barbara advised a young couple about relationships. This wasn't the life she had planned, but it was exactly the life she'd always dreamed of. "Ethan," she said. "Next time you want to win me over, try flowers. It's cheaper than $900. He laughed and spun her around. "Noted, but I doubt it would have worked as well as our crazy story." "You're right," Amber agreed. "Our story is perfect just the way it is." And it truly was. What had begun as a desperate charade had turned into the most genuine love story either of them could have imagined. That night, after the restaurant closed, the whole family gathered at the back table for dinner. Tommy shared stories about the day's funny customers. Mrs. Barbara talked about letters from old friends. Ethan brainstormed restaurant improvements, and Amber simply smiled, knowing she had found exactly where she belonged. The love they'd discovered was priceless, but it had started with exactly $900 and the courage of a desperate woman to save the mother she loved. End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of Amber and Ethan's story? Do you believe well-intentioned lies can lead to true love? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming tales.